General insurance brokers contribute greatly to the UK economy, 1% of GDP, and yet the productivity of the sector is negatively affected by what many believe is one of the most burdensome and expensive regulatory systems in the world. Our reporter Selina Downs explores the threat placed by regulation.
Every day the UK population uses the financial services of insurance brokers. We insure our cars, our homes, our lives. And while the consumer clearly needs to be protected from unethical practices, is there too much regulation of the industry? The British Insurance Brokers Association thinks there is.
In the past 5 years, the financial watchdog, the FCA, has issued 120 new papers that affect the insurance broking industry. That's one every fortnight. Within 3 years, the cost to small brokers has soared by 70%. Research shows regulation costs insurance brokers in the UK far more than in France, Germany, and most other major financial centres. BIBA's chief executive Steve White says this burden is driving small firms out of the market, affecting UK productivity.
We do a tour of the regions each autumn. Last autumn we were out doing 15 behind closed doors events all over the UK, 600 members. And what came across loud and clear at every one of those was the sheer weight of regulation. When you add on top of that the forthcoming Insurance Distribution Directive, the General Data Protection regulations that are coming, the senior managers regime, and that's not mentioning the uncertainties arising out of Brexit, we feel like we could be approaching the straw that might break the camel's back.
Craig Tracy knows only too well. The MP for North Warwickshire and Bedworth used to be a broker until onerous regulation forced him to quit the industry.
I spent 20 years as a broker. My parents were both brokers as well, so the challenge for me was when I came towards the end of running the business, about 80% of my time was actually spent on regulation. As a small broker, it was just not sustainable. It really affected my ability to grow the business.
He agrees with BIBA that much of the current legislation isn't relevant to the industry or its consumers.
The industry has never been frightened of regulation, but it's got to be fair and proportionate and also be in the interest of the consumer. My view is that a lot of the regulation that's there actually doesn't work in the best interest of our consumers.
Customers are now bombarded by a huge weight of paper, of disclosures when they take out their insurance policy. Behavioural economists will tell you that the more information you give to a customer, the less inclined they are to do anything with it other than look for the price.
It's something BIBA is working hard to change.
In our manifesto, we're calling for three things. We're calling for more proportionate and appropriate regulation. We're calling for a period of stability for the regulator to stop writing new rules and supervise against the existing rulebook. And thirdly, we're calling for a competition objective to be written back into the legislation so the regulator does take account of the competitive nature of UK financial services and the way in which it writes rules and supervises.
BIBA now has an important ally. Chair of the Treasury Select Committee, Nicky Morgan, has agreed to take brokers' concerns to the regulator. It's her job to hold the FCA to account.
The Treasury Select Committee quizzes senior officials from the FCA several times a year. And so the issue of the burden of regulation, as you might imagine, is very alive to those who the FCA regulates, and they will ask the Treasury Select Committee to raise some of these issues. So it's about making sure we've got the real detail so we can ask the FCA and others, why is that regulation needed or why has it been drafted in this way?
We're very, very low risk. Yet the regulator burdens us with a huge amount of activity.
Certainly there's a political will from myself, and government is aware, but our job as MPs, but also with people like BIBA, is to make sure that that case is continually made to the government so that they can act on it.
We will always take evidence or welcome contributions from parties outside who say, can you raise this with the FCA perhaps at this session? It's fantastic to hear from BIBA. I think their manifesto is very important. I was delighted to speak at the launch earlier on this year. And I think the Treasury Select Committee works best when we have a very open dialogue and an ongoing dialogue with key parties, and BIBA is certainly one of those.